In the year 2147, humanity had expanded beyond Earth, establishing colonies on Mars, Europa, and several exoplanets. Despite the technological advancements and interstellar trade routes, peace was tenuous, hanging by the thinnest thread of diplomacy. The unified Earth Federation UF had maintained a fragile balance with rival factions, including the Martian Independents and the Europa Syndicate. The calm shattered one fateful morning when a broadcast echoed through the colonies. A child, no older than 10, had been slain on a remote colony world by an unknown faction. The child's name was Asha, beloved by her community and hailed as a symbol of hope for interspecies cooperation. Her murder was a shocking act that sent ripples of anger throughout the UF. In response, the UF's leaders convened an emergency council. Fearing that this was the first strike in a larger conspiracy, they resolved to deploy a fleet of 500,000 dreadnoughts, massive warships armed with advanced weaponry capable of annihilating entire planets. It was an overwhelming display of military force unprecedented in human history. Commander Elena Rain, a seasoned tactician, was chosen to lead the fleet. She was known for her strategic brilliance and unwavering dedication to her crew. However, as she prepared for the mission, she felt a growing unease. Was this really a war of vengeance, or were they being manipulated into a conflict that could consume everything they had built? As the fleet traveled through the cosmos, the propaganda machine churned out stories of Asha's bravery and the need for justice. But Elena delved deeper. Her intelligence officers uncovered evidence that suggested the killing was not the act of a rival faction, but a calculated move by a rogue element within the UF itself, someone hoping to ignite a war to consolidate power. Elena found herself at a crossroads. Would she follow orders, unleashing destruction in Asha's name, or would she risk everything to uncover the truth? With the fleet mobilizing towards the suspected coordinates of the Martian Independence, she gathered a small group of loyal officers who shared her doubts. As they scoured through encrypted communications, they stumbled upon a shocking revelation. A high-ranking official within the UF had orchestrated the assassination. This individual, driven by a lust for power and control, had used the tragedy to rally the military and suppress dissent. The evidence was damning, but revealing it could lead to her court-martial or worse. Faced with a moral dilemma, Elena chose to act. She initiated a covert operation to disable the Dreadnoughts' weapon systems, hoping to stall the war long enough to expose the conspiracy. Meanwhile, she sent out a distress signal, warning the Martian Independents of the impending assault and urging them to prepare for defense, but not for war. As the fleet approached Mars, tensions ran high. The Dreadnoughts, now defenseless, drifted silently in space. The command bridge erupted in confusion as Elena's crew struggled against their orders. In that moment, a holographic image of Asha appeared on the viewscreen, a symbol of innocence that reminded them of what they were truly fighting for. With the fleet immobilized, Elena made contact with the Martian leaders, revealing the conspiracy and sharing the evidence. The Martians, shocked but grateful, agreed to stand down. In an unexpected turn, they offered to work together to uncover the rogue faction within the UF. The news spread like wildfire, igniting protests and calls for transparency back on Earth. The citizens of the UF rallied against the leaders who had perpetuated the lies, and as public pressure mounted, the rogue official was apprehended. In the aftermath, the Dreadnoughts were reconfigured into peacekeeping vessels, patrolling the borders of human colonies to prevent further conflict. Commander Rain and her crew became symbols of courage and integrity, advocating for a new era of cooperation rather than conquest. Asha's death, though tragic, became a catalyst for unity. In her memory, the UF established the Asha Foundation, dedicated to fostering peace among humanity's diverse factions. The unexpected war had been averted, but the scars remained. Elena knew that while the galaxy was filled with uncertainty, it was the choices made in moments of crisis that would ultimately define humanity's future among the stars. As the dust settled in the wake of the failed war, a fragile peace began to emerge. Commander Elena Rain stood on the observation deck of the UF flagship, the Sovereign Hope, gazing out at the vastness of space. The stars twinkled like distant promises, but the weight of the recent conflict hung heavy on her shoulders. She had acted on instinct, saving countless lives, yet the burden of Ashaz's death still haunted her. The HFY Foundation was gaining momentum, its mission resonating across the colonies. Its objective was not only to commemorate the fallen child, but to establish a framework for dialogue among the factions. Elena was appointed as its first ambassador, a role she accepted reluctantly. The last thing she wanted was to be a figurehead in a well-intentioned, but ultimately hollow initiative. Elena had seen the ravages of war. She had witnessed the fear and devastation it wrought. In her heart, she believed that peace could be forged through understanding rather than conflict. But as she prepared for her first summit with the Martian independents, she felt an unease creeping in. How could she convince others to embrace peace when old grudges ran so deep? The summit was scheduled to take place on Mars, in a neutral location, a sprawling biodome designed to replicate the lush landscapes of Earth. Delegates from various factions gathered, their expressions a mix of hope and skepticism. The air buzzed with tension as they took their seats, each side eyeing the other warily. Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Thank you all for coming. We are here not just to honor Ashaz's memory, but to create a future where no child suffers the consequences of our conflicts." The Martian delegate, a stoic figure named Terk, shifted in his seat. "Words are easy, Commander. Actions are what matter. Your fleet was poised to attack us not long ago. Why should we trust you now?" Elena met his gaze steadily. "You have every right to be skeptical, but the threat we face is greater than our divisions. The rogue faction within the youth sought to exploit our animosities for their own gain. If we do not unite against this common enemy, we risk losing everything." Murmurs rippled through the audience, and Elena pressed on. "We need to establish a council, a governing body made up of representatives from all factions. We can monitor each other's actions, ensuring that no one takes unilateral steps toward war again." Terk considered her words, and after a long silence, he nodded. "Very well, but this council must have teeth. We will not tolerate another betrayal." The discussions continued late into the night, and by dawn, an agreement began to take shape. It was a fragile framework, but it marked a significant step toward cooperation. However, Elena knew the true test lay ahead, implementing this council and keeping the rogue elements at bay. Over the next few months, the HFY Foundation held gatherings across the colonies. Elena traveled to Mars, Europa, and the fringes of the settled worlds, speaking to communities directly. Each encounter revealed the complexity of human emotion, their hopes, fears, and grudges. Many were wary, recalling the scars of past conflicts. Yet, she also encountered those who yearned for change, who believed that peace was not just possible but essential for survival. As the council began to take shape, Elena worked closely with Terk and representatives from the Europa Syndicate. They established communication lines and protocols, ensuring that every action was transparent. But beneath the surface, unease simmered. Elena received reports of dissent within the youth. Some factions clung to the idea that strength was the only path to security. One evening, as she reviewed reports on the Sovereign Hope, an urgent message flashed across her console. "Commander Rain, you need to see this," her aide said, her voice trembling. Elena's stomach dropped as the screen filled with images from a skirmish on a border colony. A fleet of unmarked ships had engaged a youth outpost, and casualties were mounting. "Who are they?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Unknown," her aide replied, "but we suspect it's a rogue faction trying to provoke conflict." Elena felt the weight of the moment. They had worked so hard to prevent another war, and now it seemed to be erupting around them. She immediately contacted Terk and other council members. "We need to act, but we cannot let this escalate," she urged. "We have to go in, assess the situation, and ensure that the blame does not fall on any one faction." Terk agreed, and within hours, a joint task force was assembled, combining forces from the HFY, the Martian Independents, and the Europa Syndicate. As they approached the conflict zone, Elena's heart raced. The tension in the air was palpable. Any wrong move could reignite the flames of war. They arrived at the colony to find the remains of the youth outpost smoldering, the ground littered with debris. Elena led a small team to assess the situation. "Keep your eyes open," she cautioned, scanning the area. "We don't know if there are more hostile forces nearby." As they moved cautiously through the wreckage, they encountered survivors' frightened civilians huddled together. One man stepped forward, his eyes wide with fear. "They came out of nowhere. They weren't Martians or Europans. They had our markings, but they weren't us." Elena felt a chill. This was a deliberate act of sabotage, aimed at fracturing the alliances they had worked so hard to build. "Who were they?" she pressed. "They were wearing black uniforms, different from ours. They were organized like a military unit, but I've never seen them before." The revelation sent a shockwave through Elena. A new enemy had emerged, one that was willing to manipulate the existing tensions for their own agenda. "We need to gather more intel," she said, turning to her team. "We can't let this go unchecked." Back on the Sovereign Hope, Elena convened an emergency meeting with Terk and the other council members. "We have a common enemy," she stated, her voice steady. "We need to find out who these attackers are before they can strike again. We cannot let fear divide us." Terk nodded, his expression serious. "We must strengthen our defenses. If they are targeting colonies, we need to ensure that our people are protected." As they devised a plan, Elena felt a flicker of hope. They had not only faced down a potential war, but had also come together in the face of a greater threat. However, she knew that time was of the essence. They had to act swiftly to avoid another catastrophe. Days turned into weeks as the Joint Task Force intensified its investigations. They combed through records, examining every scrap of data they could find about the rogue ships and their activities. Terk's intelligence network proved invaluable, uncovering patterns that hinted at a well-coordinated operation. Elena was deeply troubled by the implications. This rogue faction was not just a band of mercenaries. They had resources and the knowledge to disguise themselves as youth forces. If they could infiltrate the colonies, the Council's fragile alliances could crumble overnight. Late one evening, as she pored over data in her quarters, a message came in from Terk. "Commander, I think we've located their base of operations. It's on the outskirts of a deserted moon. We need to move quickly before they regroup." Elena felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Let's prepare a reconnaissance mission. We need to gather evidence before making any decisions." They mobilized a small team of elite operatives from each faction, intent on discovering the truth. The moon was a desolate rock, with craggy terrain and a thin atmosphere that made landing precarious. As they descended, Elena's mind raced with possibilities. Upon landing, the team set out on foot, navigating the harsh landscape toward the coordinates Terk had provided. The air was eerily quiet, the silence amplifying the tension among them. With each step, Elena could feel the weight of their mission. This was not just about stopping a rogue faction, it was about proving that unity could prevail against any threat. After hours of trekking, they finally stumbled upon a concealed entrance, half buried beneath rubble. The sight sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. They had found the heart of the operation. Elena signaled for silence as they approached. Inside, they found a series of dimly lit chambers filled with equipment and documents. Her team split up, gathering intel while maintaining security. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation. They could sense the gravity of what they were about to uncover. Suddenly, a shout erupted from one of the side rooms. "Commander, you need to see this!" Elena rushed to the source of the commotion. A large monitor displayed a live feed of the very colonies they had been protecting. Plans for coordinated attacks were laid out in detail, revealing a timeline of assaults on youth outposts and civilian targets. It was a chilling blueprint of destruction. "This is it," Terk said, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're planning to escalate, to create chaos and turn us against each other." Elena's heart raced. "We have to get this information back to the Council. If we expose them, we can unite our forces against this threat." As they gathered the crucial data, the ground trembled beneath them. Alarms blared, signaling that they had been detected. "We need to move," Elena shouted, urgency flooding her voice. They retraced their steps, racing toward the exit. But as they emerged into the moonlight, they were met by a barrage of gunfire. Uniforms surrounded them, their weapons glinting ominously in the pale light. The rogue faction had anticipated their intrusion, and they were ready. "Fall back," Elena shouted, instinctively taking point as she led her team to a nearby ridge for cover. Bullets whizzed past them, ricocheting off the rocky terrain. They had to regroup and strategize. They couldn't let themselves be cornered. "Commander, we're outnumbered," one of her officers, Lieutenant Marcos, yelled, his voice edged with panic. "Hold your position," Elena commanded, adrenaline fueling her resolve. "We have the intel. We need to make it out alive." The enemy forces closed in, and Elena's heart raced. She quickly assessed their situation, eyes darting around for any tactical advantage. "We'll create a distraction," she proposed. "Marcos, take a small team and set off a few explosives over there," she pointed to a cluster of rocky outcrops on the far side. "That should draw their attention long enough for us to make a break for it." Marcos nodded, determination igniting in his eyes. "On it, Commander." He and two others sprinted off, taking advantage of the chaos as Elena and the remaining team members hunkered down. With a deafening explosion, the rocks erupted, sending debris flying. The enemy's focus shifted, and Elena seized the moment. "Now, move!" she yelled, leading her team toward the escape shuttle they had landed earlier. They sprinted, dodging gunfire as they navigated the rough terrain. The shuttle was just within sight when a shout rang out behind them. One of the operatives, a young Martian soldier named Jax, stumbled, clutching his leg. "Keep going," Elena urged, her heart breaking at the sight. They couldn't afford to slow down. But Jax's anguished eyes pleaded for help. "I can't go," he gasped, clearly in pain. "No," Elena exclaimed, torn between duty and compassion. "We can't leave you." Tarek, who had been close by, made a decision. "I'll stay with him. Get the intel back," he shouted. Elena hesitated, but the urgency of their situation pressed down on her. "Don't let them take you, Tarek," she shouted back, fighting against the guilt threatening to consume her. "We'll find a way back. You have to hold them off." With one last glance, she turned and ran for the shuttle, the sound of gunfire echoing behind her. It felt like a betrayal, but she had to trust that Tarek would do everything in his power to protect Jax. As she climbed aboard the shuttle, she felt the weight of her team's losses pressing heavily on her heart. They had only just begun to forge alliances, and now they were facing a betrayal from within that threatened to tear everything apart. "Commander, we're ready to launch," the pilot shouted, urgency lacing his voice. "Go," Elena commanded, her heart racing as the shuttle lifted off. They ascended into the dark void of space, leaving behind the chaos of the moon. Once they were clear, she sank back in her seat, the reality of their situation settling in. "Activate the communication array," she instructed. "We need to get this intel to the Council before it's too late." As the pilot worked on the communications, Elena replayed the mission in her mind. They had come so close to uncovering the truth, only to lose valuable members of their team. She fought back tears, knowing she had to stay strong for the others. "Commander, we have a secure link to the Council," the pilot announced, pulling her from her thoughts. Elena took a deep breath and connected with the Council, Tarek's image flickering to life on the screen, looking weary but determined. "What did you find?" he asked, urgency clear in his voice. "We have evidence of the rogue faction's plans," Elena said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "They've been orchestrating attacks on youth outposts and civilian populations to create chaos and distrust among the factions." Tarek's brow furrowed. "This is exactly what we feared. If we expose this information, we can galvanize our forces against them. But we need proof, something substantial." Elena nodded. "We've got data and footage from their base. I just need a few minutes to transmit it." As she relayed the information, she felt a flicker of hope. The council members listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to determination as they realized the gravity of the situation. "We must act swiftly," Terk said after reviewing the data. "If we can expose their plans and reveal the true nature of this faction, we can turn public opinion against them. But we have to do it carefully. We can't afford another fracture." Elena agreed, her resolve solidifying. "We need to prepare for a counter-operation. We can't just defend. We need to strike at the heart of this conspiracy before they can retaliate." They worked through the night, drafting a plan that united their forces. Each faction would contribute its strengths, and together they would expose the rogue elements, rooting them out before they could do more damage. As dawn broke, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. They were no longer just reacting to threats. They were taking the initiative. She gathered her team, ready to lead them into the unknown. The operation commenced with precision. Reconnaissance teams scoured the remaining bases of the rogue faction, gathering intelligence and tracking their movements. Elena coordinated with Terk and other leaders, ensuring they were all on the same page. Then, just as they were beginning to feel the tide turning in their favor, a shocking development unfolded. News reached them that the rogue faction had launched a surprise attack on a key youth supply line, cutting off vital resources and leaving colonies vulnerable. "We have to respond immediately," Elena said, her pulse quickening as she watched the live feed of the attack. The scene was chaotic, with ships caught in the crossfire and civilians fleeing for safety. "We can't just defend," Terk urged. "We need to push back and reclaim control of that supply line." Elena nodded. "Prepare the fleet for an offensive. We're going to hit them hard and make sure they understand that we won't be divided." As the fleet mobilized, Elena felt a rush of adrenaline. This was a pivotal moment. The stakes had never been higher, and failure was not an option. The joint forces, now bolstered by additional ships and personnel from the Martian Independence and the Europa Syndicate, set out toward the supply line. The atmosphere was tense, each member acutely aware of the risks ahead. As they approached the area, Elena felt a sense of foreboding wash over her. She had seen too many battles turn chaotic, too many lives lost. "Stay sharp," she warned her team. "They'll be expecting us." They moved into position, their ships gliding silently through the void. As they engaged the rogue faction's forces, the vacuum of space erupted with flashes of energy. Explosions lit the darkness, and the battle quickly turned fierce. Elena took command from the bridge of the Sovereign Hope, coordinating maneuvers and directing fire. "Focus on their command ships," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "If we can disrupt their leadership, the rest will fall apart." Her team responded with precision, targeting the larger vessels that had been orchestrating the attacks. The tide began to shift in their favor, but as the enemy ships faltered, a larger, more menacing ship emerged from the shadows. It dwarfed their fleet, its hull blackened and imposing. "What the hell is that?" one of her officers exclaimed, eyes wide. "It looks like a battleship," Elena said, heart racing. "They must have been hiding it." The rogue battleship opened fire, its weaponry unleashing a torrent of destruction. Ships from both sides were caught in the crossfire, and Elena felt a wave of dread wash over her. They were not just fighting a rogue faction. They were up against a well-equipped enemy determined to maintain its grip on power. "Divert all power to shields," she ordered. "We have to hold together until we can devise a plan." The crew worked feverishly, the tension palpable as they struggled to withstand the barrage. Elena's mind raced, searching for a way to turn the tide. Suddenly, she recalled the intelligence they had gathered from the rogue base, an access point to their ship's systems that could potentially be exploited. "Can we use the data we obtained?" she asked her tech officer, urgency sharpening her voice. "It's a risk, Commander," he replied, hands flying over the controls. "But if we can access their systems, we might be able to disable their weaponry." "Then let's do it," Elena said, determination flooding her. "We have to try." The officer began working on the plan, inputting commands as Elena coordinated the defense against the ongoing assault. The crew rallied, their focus unyielding despite the chaos surrounding them. As the rogue battleship continued to unleash its firepower, Elena felt time stretching taut. "We need to create a diversion," she said, thinking quickly. "Can we launch a small strike team to disrupt their operations from the inside?" "Yes, but it'll require precise timing," the tech officer replied, glancing at her anxiously. "We'll need your leadership to keep the distraction going while they move in." "Then let's coordinate," Elena said, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. "We can't let this slip away." Drawing its attention while a small strike team prepared to board the rogue battleship and access its systems. The stakes were monumental, but Elena felt a surge of hope. They had come this far together, and they could not afford to falter now. As the battle raged on, Elena's heart raced. "Engage their flank," she shouted, watching as her ships executed the maneuver with precision. The enemy battleship was massive, and their smaller vessels darted around it like insects, trying to exploit any weakness. The rogue faction ships fought fiercely, but Elena sensed that they were beginning to falter under the coordinated assault. She watched as her tactical officer's face lit up with the realization. "They're diverting power to their rear defenses. We can hit them now." "Push forward," Elena ordered, her voice ringing with authority. "Keep the pressure on." As the Sovereign Hope surged ahead, she felt the energy of her crew fueling her determination. They weren't just fighting for their own survival, they were fighting for every colony, every life that could be lost to this chaos. With every shot fired, she envisioned Ashaz's face, her laughter echoing in her mind, a reminder of what was at stake. Meanwhile, the strike team prepared to launch from a secondary bay on the Sovereign Hope. Led by Lieutenant Marcos, who had miraculously made it back despite the chaos, they checked their gear and weapons one last time. "We go in, disrupt their systems, and get out," he said, his voice steady. "No heroics. We stick to the plan." With a final nod of resolve, they boarded their shuttle and launched toward the enemy battleship, weaving through fire and debris. The shuttle was a small, agile craft designed for quick strikes, and it navigated through the chaos with ease. As they neared the rogue battleship's hull, Marcos and his team activated their cloaking devices, minimizing their visibility. "We're in position," he reported back to Elena over the comms. "We'll breach the lower deck and head for their control room." "Be careful, Lieutenant," Elena urged. "Remember, if you can access their systems, we'll have the advantage. We're counting on you." "Understood. We won't let you down," Marcos replied, determination evident in his tone. As the shuttle made contact, they silently maneuvered through the lower decks, utilizing their advanced stealth technology to avoid detection. Inside the ship, the atmosphere was tense, the corridors filled with the low hum of machinery and the distant sounds of battle. Marcos led his team through the dimly lit halls, checking corners and ensuring they were not detected. They reached the control room, a heavy door blocking their path. "On my mark," he instructed, and the team positioned themselves for a quick entry. With a swift kick, the door flew open, revealing a room filled with control panels and monitors displaying chaos from the ongoing battle. Rogue faction operatives swiveled in surprise, guns drawn, but Marcos and his team acted quickly, taking them by surprise. The firefight was brief but intense. They fought with precision, quickly subduing the enemy operatives. "Secure the area," Marcos yelled, breathing heavily as they assessed the room. "We need to access their systems." As they took control of the control room, the team worked furiously to breach the battleship's network. "I'm in," one of the tech specialists exclaimed, fingers flying over the console as he navigated through layers of security protocols. Meanwhile, back on the Sovereign Hope, Elena felt the tide of the battle shifting. "We're making progress," she shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins as they continued to engage the battleship. "Keep the pressure on. We can't give them a moment to regroup." As the rogue battleship's weaponry continued to fire, Elena spotted a chance. "All ships, concentrate fire on that section," she pointed to a specific area where the battleship's armor appeared weakest. Energy beams lit up the void as their combined forces aimed for that vulnerability. The enemy's defenses crumbled under the assault, and Elena's heart soared. They were gaining ground. But just as victory seemed within reach, a sudden jolt rocked the sovereign hope. "What was that?" Elena demanded, gripping her console to steady herself. "Sir, we've sustained damage to our starboard side," an officer shouted. "They've unleashed a secondary weapon system." "Divert all power to shields," Elena ordered, her mind racing. They couldn't afford to lose their flagship, not when they were so close to success. Back in the control room of the rogue battleship, the tech specialist continued to navigate through the enemy systems. "I've got the core systems open," he shouted. "I can disable their weaponry from here." "Do it," Marcos shouted back, urgency in his voice. As the tech specialist initiated the shutdown sequence, alarms blared throughout the battleship, lights flashing red in a frantic warning. The rogue faction was clearly aware of their breach, and chaos erupted as they scrambled to regain control. "Commander, they're aware of our presence," another team member shouted. "We need to get out of here now." Marcos nodded, scanning the control room for an exit. "Let's move. We've done what we came here to do. We can't stay any longer." Just as they turned to flee, a door burst open, and enemy reinforcements flooded in, weapons raised. "Get down," Marcos shouted, and they hit the floor as a hail of gunfire erupted around them. "Cover fire," Marcos yelled, returning fire as his team scrambled for the nearest exit. The atmosphere was chaotic, and Elena could feel the tension mounting in the comms. "Status report," Elena shouted into the radio, anxiety gripping her. "We're pinned down," Marcos replied, his voice strained. "We've disabled their weapon systems, but they're coming for us. We need backup." "Hold tight, we're coming," Elena urged, rallying her crew. They were outnumbered, but the unity forged through their struggles would not falter. "Deploy the remaining fighters," she commanded. "We need to give them cover while they escape." As the fighters launched into the fray, Elena felt a sense of urgency surge through her. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for every faction, every life that had been threatened by the chaos. The fighters engaged the reinforcements, creating a diversion that allowed Marcos and his team to escape the control room. "We've got to move now," Marcos shouted, leading his team through the labyrinth of corridors as enemy forces pursued them. The firefight continued, chaos erupting as the rogue faction tried to regain control of their ship. Elena's forces pressed forward, determined to keep the pressure on and give Marcos and his team a fighting chance. "Commander, we've received a message from the Council," an officer called out, urgency lacing their voice. "They want to know our status." Elena clenched her jaw, focusing on the battle. "Tell them we're close to victory, but we need to buy time for the strike team to escape." "Copy that," the officer replied, relaying the message as Elena continued to coordinate their assault. The tide of battle shifted, the combined forces of the youth and the Martian independents working in tandem to push back against the rogue faction. Elena could feel the momentum building, but she knew it wouldn't last long. They had to secure a decisive victory before they could truly claim their ground. Meanwhile, in the depths of the rogue battleship, Marcos and his team navigated the dimly lit halls, adrenaline coursing through their veins. "We need to reach the docking bay," he urged, determination etched on his face. "We can't risk being trapped here." They moved swiftly, dodging enemy fire as they approached the docking bay doors. As they neared the exit, they encountered a blockade of rogue soldiers, weapons drawn and ready. "Get back," one of the soldiers shouted, but Marcos was ready. He signaled for his team to fan out, and they engaged in a fierce firefight. The sound of gunfire filled the air as they fought their way through the blockade. Marcos felt the pressure mounting. They were close, but they needed to act quickly before reinforcements arrived. "Push forward," he shouted, adrenaline propelling him as they fought back against the enemy. With every step, they fought for their lives, the stakes higher than ever. They could hear the distant echoes of battle outside, the fate of their alliances hanging in the balance. Just as they managed to break through the blockade, an explosion rocked the corridor, sending debris flying. Marcos shielded his eyes, and when he opened them, He saw a flicker of movement, another enemy unit approaching. "Run!" he shouted, urgency in his voice. They dashed toward the docking bay, hearts pounding in unison. When they finally reached the bay, they found their shuttle waiting. The team quickly boarded, but as they prepared for launch, alarms blared throughout the ship. "They've initiated lockdown protocols," one of the tech specialists exclaimed. "We're going to be trapped." "Override it," Marcos commanded, fear creeping into his voice. "We can't stay here." As the tech specialist worked furiously to bypass the lockdown, the shuttle was rocked by enemy fire. "We're taking damage," the pilot yelled, trying to maintain control. "Just a little longer," Marcos urged, desperation filling the air. Finally, with a triumphant shout, the tech specialist succeeded. "We're clear. Go, go, go." The shuttle shot out of the docking bay just as a massive explosion rocked the rogue battleship behind them, a brilliant burst of light against the dark backdrop of space. The team barely had time to catch their breath as they navigated the chaos outside. "Engage cloaking," the pilot shouted, fingers flying over the controls. They activated their stealth systems just in time, allowing them to slip past the debris and enemy ships without drawing attention. Marcos leaned back in his seat, heart racing. "We made it," he breathed, a mix of relief and disbelief flooding through him. But the battle isn't over yet. Back on the Sovereign Hope, Elena watched as the rogue battleship began to drift, its systems failing under the pressure of their assault. "Press the attack. We can't let them regroup," she ordered, determination hardening her voice. Her crew responded with fierce resolve, their collective will forging a formidable defense. They engaged the remaining enemy ships, the tide of battle turning in their favor. "Commander, we have visual confirmation. The strike team is clear," one of her officers reported, joy evident in their tone. "They're on their way back." "Good," Elena said, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "Let's finish this." As they pressed forward, the last remnants of the rogue faction began to falter. The alliance of factions had proven stronger than anyone had anticipated. But just as victory seemed assured, a new threat emerged. A massive warship, unlike anything they had seen before, appeared from the shadows, looming ominously on the edge of the battlefield. Its design was sleek, with dark armor and weaponry that glinted menacingly. Elena's heart sank as she recognized the insignia emblazoned across its hull. "It's the Obsidian Legion," an officer exclaimed, eyes wide with shock. "They've joined the rogue faction." "Reinforcements? They must have known we were coming," Elena realized, dread pooling in her stomach. "Prepare for engagement." The new warship unleashed a barrage of fire, targeting the Sovereign Hope directly. Elena's crew scrambled to respond, the bridge filled with shouts and urgent commands. "Deploy countermeasures," Elena shouted, gripping the console as the ship shook under the impact of incoming blasts. "And get us out of the line of fire." As they maneuvered to avoid the onslaught, she felt the weight of the battle pressing down on her. This was no longer just about defeating a rogue faction. It was about survival against a well-organized threat. In the chaos, the strike team's shuttle re-entered the field, weaving through the debris as they approached the Sovereign Hope. Marcos's voice crackled over the comms. "We're back on board. What's our status?" "Hold on. We've got incoming," Elena shouted, her eyes focused on the warship bearing down on them. "Get to the hangar and prepare for launch." As they landed, Elena couldn't shake the feeling of urgency. "We need to regroup and come up with a new plan," she said, gathering her team. "The Obsidian Legion is here, and they won't hesitate to take us out." Tarek, who had joined them, nodded grimly. "We'll need to leverage our allies. The Martian Independence and Europa Syndicate need to know what we're facing. We can't let this escalate further." The crew worked quickly, coordinating with the remaining ships in their fleet. "We need to split their forces," Elena said, her mind racing. "If we can divert their attention, we might be able to strike at their weak points." As the team began to implement their new strategy, the Sovereign Hope shook again under enemy fire. Shields holding at 70%, an officer shouted, urgency lacing their voice. Divert auxiliary power to forward shields, Elena commanded, her focus unwavering. They had to endure until they could regroup. Marcos and his team joined them on the bridge, catching their breath. We managed to gather intel on their capabilities, he reported, handing Elena a data pad. They've got advanced weaponry and shield systems, but there are weaknesses in their armor. If we coordinate our fire, we can exploit those vulnerabilities. Good work, Elena said, absorbing the information. Let's put together a plan of attack. As they strategized, the warship loomed closer, its cannons primed and ready. Elena's heart raced with determination. We're not backing down. This is our chance to show them that we're united. With their plan in place, the crew began to execute their maneuvers. They sent smaller ships to create distractions, while the main fleet focused on the Obsidian Legion's warship. As their fighters engaged the enemy, Elena's heart swelled with pride. Her crew worked seamlessly, their combined efforts driving back the overwhelming tide. Push forward, she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. We can't let them gain ground. The battle intensified, energy beams streaking through the void, like the dark expanse of space. The Sovereign Hope surged forward, Elena at the helm, commanding her crew with fierce resolve. Target their shield emitters, she ordered, watching as their ships executed the maneuvers flawlessly. We need to break through. As they engaged, the Obsidian Legion's warship retaliated with ferocity. Elena felt the impact of their blasts, the ship shuddering under the assault. Status report, she shouted, fighting to maintain control. Shields holding at 50%. We're sustaining damage, an officer yelled, anxiety palpable. Reinforcements are en route, Terk added, his eyes scanning the screens. If we can hold out just a little longer, we'll have backup. Elena felt a surge of determination. They had faced impossible odds before, and they would do so again. Stay the course, focus on those weak points. In the heat of the battle, their ships pressed forward, exploiting the vulnerabilities in the Obsidian Legion's defenses. The tide began to shift again, the enemy warship starting to falter under the relentless assault. But just when victory seemed within reach, a new development occurred. The warship initiated a self-destruct sequence, alarms blaring throughout the vessel. "Commander, they're going to blow," an officer shouted, panic rising in their voice. "Get us out of here," Elena commanded, adrenaline surging. "Now." The crew scrambled, the pilot maneuvering the Sovereign Hope away from the impending explosion. They barely cleared the blast radius as the warship erupted in a cataclysmic explosion, a shockwave rocking their ship. Elena gripped the console, her heart racing. "Status report. Minor damage to hull, but we're holding," an officer replied, relief evident. "We're clear of the blast." As they took stock of their surroundings, Elena's eyes widened in disbelief. The battlefield was filled with debris from the destroyed warship, the remnants of the rogue factions scattered across the void. "Did we win?" Marcos asked, breathless as he caught his breath. "We did," Elena replied, a mixture of relief and triumph flooding through her. "But this isn't over. The rogue faction is still out there, and the Obsidian Legion won't give up easily." They took a moment to regroup, the weight of their victory mingling with the reality of the challenges ahead. The alliances forged in battle had proven stronger than expected, but they knew they had only scratched the surface of a much larger conflict. "Commander," Terk said, his expression serious, "we need to prepare for the fallout. The Council will want to discuss our next steps, and we need to address the losses we've faced." Elena nodded, her heart heavy with a burden of leadership. "We will. But first, let's assess the damage and regroup. We need to make sure our forces are ready for whatever comes next." As the crew worked to stabilize the ship, Elena felt a flicker of hope. They had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. They would continue to fight for their people, for the future they envisioned. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. Together, they would stand against the shadows threatening to engulf their world. and as long as they remained united, there was no challenge too great. Days passed as they repaired the Sovereign Hope and prepared for their next move. The council convened, and Elena joined them, ready to present their findings and discuss their plans for the future. As she stepped into the chamber, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Council members from various factions exchanged anxious glances, the weight of their recent losses evident in their expressions. Elena took a deep breath, steeling herself for the discussions ahead. "We faced a formidable enemy," she began, her voice steady. "But we emerged victorious. The rogue faction has been dealt a significant blow, and we have gathered valuable intel on the Obsidian Legion's capabilities." The council listened intently as she outlined their strategy and the alliances formed during the battle. "However, we cannot afford to be complacent. The Obsidian Legion is still a threat, and we must act swiftly to counter their influence." Terk spoke next, emphasizing the need for a united front. "If we can leverage the momentum from our victory, we can rally support from other factions and bolster our defenses. The time to act is now." Elena nodded in agreement. "We need to formulate a comprehensive plan that addresses both immediate and long-term threats. Our alliances must be strengthened, and we must be prepared to confront the Obsidian Legion head-on." The council members exchanged ideas, their voices rising in passionate debate. Some advocated for a defensive strategy, emphasizing the need to fortify their existing territories. Others argued for an aggressive approach, suggesting that they should take the fight to the Obsidian Legion, dismantling their operations before they could regroup. Elena listened closely, weighing the merits of each argument. She understood the fears that fueled their discussions. The recent battles had taken a toll, both on their forces and on their morale. Yet, she also recognized the necessity of seizing the initiative while they had the momentum. "May I remind everyone," Elena interjected, her voice calm yet firm, "that we have the chance to redefine the balance of power in this sector. The Obsidian Legion's tactics rely on intimidation and coercion. If we show them that we can stand united, we can dismantle their hold over the rogue faction and any others that may consider following their lead." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, but skepticism still lingered. "What assurance do we have that we won't be outmatched again?" a council member from the Europa Syndicate asked, crossing his arms defiantly. "Their resources are vast, and they'll be planning their next move even as we sit here." Terk stepped forward, his demeanor calm. "That's precisely why we need to act now. We have valuable intel from the battles we've fought. If we can coordinate our forces and gather intelligence on their operations, we can strike at their weakest points." Elena nodded, emboldened by Terk's confidence. "We can launch reconnaissance missions to gather more data. The Martian Independents have scouts that are adept at stealth operations. If we can mobilize them quickly, we can learn where the Obsidian Legion is most vulnerable." The council's tone shifted slightly, a growing sense of urgency taking hold. "We need to decide on a unified approach," Elena said, her voice steady. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about every faction and every colony that could fall under the Legion's sway." After hours of heated discussions, a consensus began to form. The council agreed to initiate reconnaissance missions while simultaneously bolstering their defenses. They would work together to create a united front against the Obsidian Legion, ready to counter any moves made by their adversaries. As they finalized their plans, Elena felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had come together in a time of crisis, and despite their differences, they were ready to face the challenges ahead. Days turned into weeks as they prepared for their next steps. Reconnaissance missions were launched, small teams dispatched to gather intelligence on the Obsidian Legion's operations. Each report that returned confirmed Elena's fears. The Legion was amassing forces, regrouping after their loss, and expanding their influence among rogue factions. "Commander, we've received an urgent report from our scouts," Terk said one morning, his expression grim as he entered the command center. "They've located a major supply depot just outside the Peridian Belt, heavily guarded but critical for the Legion's operations." Elena's heart raced. "If we can take that out, We could significantly disrupt their logistics, she replied, her mind racing with possibilities. How many forces do we think we need? Given the level of security, I'd recommend a strike team supported by a small fleet. We need to hit them hard and fast before they can react, Tarek suggested, his eyes alight with determination. Elena nodded. Let's mobilize our forces. We'll assemble a strike team with our best operatives and coordinate with the Martian Independents for additional support. If we do this right, we can cripple their supply chain. As preparations began, Elena felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. The momentum of their recent victory surged within her, but the reality of the upcoming mission weighed heavily. Lives were at stake, and they had to succeed. On the day of the operation, the mood in the hangar was electric. Crew members hustled around, double-checking gear and weapons as the strike team assembled. Marcos, leading the team, exuded confidence as he went over the plan one last time. Remember, our objective is to breach the supply depot, disable their operations, and retreat before reinforcements can arrive, he instructed. We're relying on speed and stealth. Let's keep comms clear and watch each other's backs. As they launched, Elena felt her heart pounding in anticipation. The strike team's shuttle flew silently through the void, cloaked against enemy sensors. Outside, the stars glittered like diamonds against the dark canvas of space. They approached the Peridian Belt, a swirling mass of asteroids that provided natural cover. As they drew closer to the supply depot, Elena monitored their progress from the command center aboard the Sovereign Hope. Visual confirmation of the target, one of the officers announced, displaying the depot on the main screen. It was a sprawling complex, surrounded by a defensive perimeter of ships and automated turrets. Heavy security, but we can see gaps in their patrols. Good. Let's move in and give the strike team the best chance possible, Elena said, her pulse quickening. Once they're inside, we'll provide cover fire to help them exfiltrate. Marcos's voice crackled over the comms. We're preparing to breach. Stay alert, and don't engage until we give the signal. As the shuttle approached, Elena could see the complex's defenses more clearly. The strike team descended onto the surface, stealth suits blending into the shadows, moving like phantoms. On my mark, Marcos instructed as they reached the perimeter. 3, 2, 1, now. The team sprang into action, neutralizing the guards with precision. Elena's heart raced as she watched the footage from the shuttle's camera feed. They were in, but the clock was ticking. The enemy would soon realize they were under attack. Establishing a perimeter, Marcos ordered. We need to get to the control room and shut down their defenses. As the team navigated through the complex, Elena remained vigilant, her eyes scanning the monitors. She could feel the tension in the air as they approached their objective. Commander, we've encountered resistance, Marcos reported, the sounds of gunfire crackling through the comms. We're engaging. Hold your ground, Elena shouted, adrenaline surging through her. We'll support you from here. As the fight intensified, Elena coordinated the defensive measures from the Sovereign Hope. All available ships, engage the enemy perimeter, she ordered. We need to create a diversion. Fighters launched into the fray, engaging the enemy ships and automated turrets guarding the depot. The complex erupted into chaos as explosions light the darkness, smoke and debris clouding the air. Marcos, how's it going in there? Elena called, her heart pounding in her chest. We're almost to the control room, he replied, determination lacing his voice. Just need a little more time. Elena's mind raced. They were running out of it, and she could sense the enemy reinforcements moving in. You have to hurry. We can't afford to lose this opportunity. As the strike team pressed forward, they faced heavy resistance, the enemy scrambling to regain control. We're engaging multiple hostiles, one of the team members reported, gunfire echoing in the background. Elena felt her stomach twist in knots, the weight of their mission heavy on her shoulders. Stay focused, you're almost there. With a final push, the strike team reached the control room, a critical moment hanging in the balance. We're in, Marcos shouted. Initiating shutdown sequence now. Cover him, Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos. We need that control room secure. As the team engaged the enemy inside, Elena felt a surge of pride. They were fighting for something greater than themselves, a collective will to protect their people and their future. The countdown began, and the tension in the air thickened. Elena could see the enemy forces converging on their position, a sea of chaos threatening to engulf them. We have to get out of here, she urged. Just a little longer, Marcos shouted back, fingers flying over the controls. Almost there. As the shutdown sequence completed, alarms blared throughout the depot. The lights flickered, and the defenses began to fail, the automated turrets powering down one by one. Now, we need to move, Marcos yelled, urgency clear in his voice. The team made a break for the exit, fighting off the remaining enemies. Outside, the Sovereign Hope and their allied ships held the line, engaged in a fierce firefight with the enemy reinforcements. Elena felt the adrenaline coursing through her as she coordinated their movements. Press forward, she shouted. We need to cover the strike team's exit. As the strike team sprinted toward the hangar, Elena's heart raced. Get ready to extract them, she called to the pilot. They'll be there any moment. Just as the team reached the hangar, enemy fire erupted around them. Cover fire, Marcos shouted, returning fire as they moved. Elena watched, her heart in her throat. Hold them off. They're almost there. The team dove into the shuttle, and Elena's relief washed over her like a wave. Get them out of here, she commanded the pilot. As the shuttle lifted off, enemy fire erupted around them, but they managed to slip through the chaos. We're clear, the pilot shouted, the shuttle speeding away from the danger. Had executed their mission against overwhelming odds and had emerged victorious. The supply depot was now crippled, and they had disrupted the Obsidian Legion's logistics. Back aboard the Sovereign Hope, the atmosphere was electric. Crew members greeted the returning strike team with cheers, the relief palpable. Elena stood at the center of the command deck, a mix of pride and exhaustion washing over her. She had led them through this challenge, and they had triumphed together. Marcos, Terk, gather the team in the briefing room, she instructed, her voice steady. We need to debrief and discuss our next steps. As the strike team filed into the briefing room, the energy shifted from celebratory to serious. Elena took her seat at the head of the table, looking around at the faces of her crew, some worn but resolute, others still buzzing with adrenaline. First, let me say how proud I am of each of you, Elena began, her tone sincere. What we accomplished today was no small feat. We struck a critical blow against the Obsidian Legion, and your teamwork and bravery made it possible. Thanks, Commander, Marcos replied, a smile breaking through the fatigue. But we need to talk about the implications of what we've just done. Elena nodded, the weight of reality settling in. You're right. While we've achieved a significant victory, we've also made ourselves a target. The Obsidian Legion will retaliate, and we must be ready. Terk interjected. Our scouts have reported increased activity in their ranks. They're likely mobilizing for a counteroffensive, and we need to anticipate their moves. Marcos leaned forward, his brow furrowing. We should consider launching additional strikes to disrupt their operations before they can regroup. If we can keep them on the defensive, we might buy ourselves time to fortify our position. Elena considered his words carefully. That's a valid point, but we need to balance offense with defense. We can't afford to stretch ourselves too thin. We must ensure our territories are secure while also pressing our advantage. The team engaged in a spirited discussion, weighing the pros and cons of various strategies. As they talked, Elena felt a surge of gratitude for the strength of her crew. Each voice brought valuable perspectives, and together they were forging a path forward. After an hour of intense discussion, they began to outline a plan. They would conduct a series of targeted strikes against the Obsidian Legion's supply lines while reinforcing their own defenses. The objective was clear: maintain the initiative while ensuring their own safety. Let's assign roles and responsibilities, Elena said, pulling up a holographic display of the current battlefield. "Marcos, you'll lead the next strike team. I want you to focus on their eastern supply route, as that's where we have the most intel on their operations." "Understood," Marcos replied, a determined glint in his eye. "Terk, coordinate with our allies to ensure they're ready to support us," Elena continued. "We need their intel and resources to keep the pressure on the Legion." "I'll reach out to the Martian Independence and Europa Syndicate," Terk replied, already making notes. "And I'll ensure our ships are fully stocked and ready for rapid deployment," Elena added. "We can't afford any delays." As the meeting wrapped up, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had a plan, and they were moving forward together. Over the next few days, the crew worked tirelessly to prepare for the upcoming operations. Tensions remained high, but the atmosphere aboard the Sovereign Hope was charged with a sense of unity. Each member understood their role and the stakes involved. On the day of the next operation, Elena stood on the bridge, surveying the star-studded expanse ahead. The ships were ready, and the crew was poised for action. She felt the familiar flutter of nerves in her stomach, but she also felt something else: resolve. "Commander, all systems are green," the pilot reported. "We're ready to jump to the eastern supply route." "Very well. Let's move," Elena commanded, her voice steady. "Stay alert. We don't know what we'll encounter." As the fleet transitioned into hyperspace, Elena's mind raced with the possibilities. They had to stay one step ahead of the Obsidian Legion, and the stakes were higher than ever. The jump was swift, and moments later, they emerged into real space, the stars swirling around them. The sight ahead was both exhilarating and daunting. The eastern supply route lay before them, and there were ships already in motion. Some of them belonged to the Obsidian Legion. "Visual confirmation of enemy ships," an officer shouted. "Looks like they're preparing to transport supplies." "Deploy the fleet," Elena ordered. "We need to engage before they can get away." The Sovereign Hope surged forward, flanked by Allied vessels. Elena's heart raced as they moved into formation, weapons primed and ready. "Prepare to intercept." As they closed in, the enemy ships took notice. Blasts of energy fired through the void, light the darkness as both sides exchanged fire. "Return fire," Elena commanded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Focus on their lead vessel. It's vital to their supply chain." The fleet engaged with precision, coordinated attacks, disrupting the enemy's formation. Elena felt a sense of exhilaration, their strategies coming to life in a symphony of chaos and brilliance. "Enemy ship disabled," an officer reported. "We've taken out their transport." "Good work. Press the attack," Elena shouted. They had gained the upper hand, but the battle was far from over. The engagement intensified, enemy vessels scrambling to regroup as the Sovereign Hope led the charge. The crew fought valiantly, their training and determination shining through in the heat of battle. "Watch your flanks, they're trying to outmaneuver us," Terk shouted from his station, his eyes scanning the sensors. Elena directed the fleet's movements, ensuring they maintained their advantage. The tide of battle swirled around them, the outcome hanging in the balance. "We need to disable their command ship," she urged. "That's the key to breaking their defenses." As they pressed forward, an alarm blared on the bridge. "Commander, incoming enemy reinforcements," an officer shouted. "We've got a large force jumping in." Elena's heart sank as she surveyed the tactical display. More ships were materializing, swarming toward them like a storm. "Prepare to engage. We can't let them regroup." The battle morphed into chaos as enemy reinforcements poured into the fray. Elena's crew fought with unwavering determination, but the odds were shifting. They needed to retreat and regroup or risk being overwhelmed. "Pull back," Elena shouted. "We can't engage against such overwhelming numbers." Just as they began to execute their retreat, the enemy command ship fired a devastating shot, striking the Sovereign Hope directly. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as systems went haywire. "Status report," Elena yelled, gripping the console as the ship rocked. "Shields down to 30%. We're sustaining damage." an officer replied, panic in their voice. "Get us out of here, now," Elena commanded, her heart racing as they maneuvered to evade the onslaught. With a final, desperate push, the pilot activated the jump drive, and the ship lurched into hyperspace, narrowly escaping the battle. As they emerged back in real space, the bridge fell into an uneasy silence. Elena looked around, her heart heavy. They had achieved their objective, but at a cost. "Damage report," she ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Minor hull breaches, but overall we're stable," an officer replied, relief creeping into their voice. "Shields are at 10%. Elena exhaled, her mind racing. "We need to assess our losses and regroup. We can't afford another encounter like that." As they began to stabilize the ship and conduct repairs, Elena felt the weight of the mission pressing down on her. They had gained some ground, but the battle was becoming increasingly perilous. That evening, Elena called for another meeting with her crew. The atmosphere was somber, the reality of their situation settling heavily in the air. "Today's engagement was a reminder of the risks we're facing," Elena began, looking around at the faces of her team. "We achieved our objective, but the Obsidian Legion is proving to be a formidable adversary. We need to recalibrate our strategy." Marcos nodded, his expression serious. "We can't keep pushing our forces into battles where we're outnumbered. We need to play to our strengths and wait for the right moment to strike." "I agree," Tarek added. "We should focus on intelligence gathering and fortifying our defenses for now. We've made significant progress, but we can't lose sight of our vulnerabilities." Elena listened intently, her mind racing as they discussed their next steps. They would need to take a step back, reevaluate their resources, and consider a more strategic approach to the war ahead. As the discussions continued, a sense of camaraderie emerged. Despite the setbacks they had faced, the crew rallied around each other, determined to find a path forward. Over the next few weeks, they implemented a series of defensive measures and established a network of scouts to gather intelligence on the Obsidian Legion's movements. The atmosphere aboard the Sovereign Hope shifted from tension to resilience. They were adapting, evolving in the face of adversity. Flashed across the screen. It was from Tarek, who had been in communication with the Martian Independents. "Commander, we've received word that the Obsidian Legion is planning a significant operation against one of the fringe colonies' new series," Tarek announced, his voice tinged with urgency. "They're mobilizing a large force, and if we don't intervene, the colony could fall." Elena's heart sank. New Series was not only a vital resource hub, but also home to thousands of civilians. The prospect of the Legion taking control of it was terrifying. "What's our window for action?" she asked, her mind racing. "We have a few days before they arrive," Tarek replied, pulling up a tactical map of the area. "If we can move quickly and coordinate with our allies, we might be able to reinforce the colony's defenses in time." Marcos, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "We can't afford to waste this opportunity. If we can secure New Series, we'll deal a significant blow to the Obsidian Legion's plans and strengthen our position in the sector." Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. "Let's assemble the crew. We need to act swiftly. This is our chance to protect innocent lives and send a message to the Legion that we will not stand idly by." The atmosphere on the Sovereign Hope was charged with purpose as the crew sprang into action. Within hours, they had gathered their forces, established communication with the Martian Independents, and mapped out a plan to intercept the Obsidian Legion. "Marcos, you'll lead the strike team to New Series," Elena directed. "I want you to work closely with the colony's defense forces to ensure they're prepared for the assault." "Understood, Commander," Marcos replied, his expression determined. "We'll coordinate our efforts to bolster their defenses and set traps for the enemy." Tarek added, "I'll stay in contact with the Independents to ensure we have real-time intelligence on the Legion's movements. We'll need to be ready for any surprises." As the Sovereign Hope made its way toward New Series, Elena felt the familiar mix of anxiety and determination swirl within her. This was their chance to reclaim the initiative, and she could feel the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. They arrived at New Ceres just as dusk settled over the horizon, casting a golden hue over the sprawling colony. It was a stark contrast to the tension that filled the air. Elena observed the colony's defenses, a mix of hastily assembled barricades and makeshift weaponry. The people were clearly anxious, and she could see fear etched on their faces. "We're here to help," Elena called out as they disembarked, her voice firm but reassuring. "We're going to reinforce your defenses and prepare for an attack. We need to work together to protect your home." The local defense commander, a weary but resolute figure named Captain Hale, stepped forward. "Thank you for coming. We've heard whispers of the Legion's plans, but we didn't expect them to mobilize this quickly. We need all the help we can get." "Let's assess your defenses and see where we can improve," Marcos suggested, stepping up alongside Elena. "We'll need to set up an early warning system and prepare traps along the expected approach routes." As the team began to survey the area, Elena felt the pressure mounting. She had to ensure that they were ready for whatever the Obsidian Legion had in store. Hours turned into days as they worked tirelessly to fortify New Ceres. The crew of the Sovereign Hope collaborated closely with the colony's defenders, sharing knowledge and resources to create a robust defense network. Elena felt a deep sense of purpose as she watched the community rally together, their determination igniting hope in the face of uncertainty. Terk continued to monitor the Legion's movements, feeding the team critical updates. "They're on the move, Commander. We estimate they'll arrive within the next 24 hours, he reported one evening. "We need to finalize our preparations." "Let's get everyone on high alert," Elena instructed. "We need to ensure that everyone knows their roles. If we're going to stand a chance, we must be coordinated and ready to respond." As night fell over New Ceres, Elena stood atop a makeshift command center, surveying the colony below. The lights flickered in the distance, casting a warm glow against the encroaching darkness. But beneath the surface, tension rippled through the air. She could feel the collective anxiety of the defenders, the weight of the impending battle resting heavily on their shoulders. "Commander, we've finished the barricades and traps along the southern approach," Marcos reported, his voice breaking through her thoughts. "We'll be ready to engage as soon as they arrive." Elena nodded, pride swelling in her chest. "Excellent work. We've prepared as much as we can. Now, we wait." The hours dragged on, the quiet punctuated only by the distant hum of machinery and the occasional rustle of wind. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, casting an orange glow across the landscape. "Commander, we're picking up signals on the scanners," Terk called from the communications station. "The Legion's forces are approaching fast. They're moving in formation, likely to maximize their firepower." "Get the defenders into position," Elena ordered, her pulse quickening. "We need to be ready to engage as soon as they're within range." Marcos rallied the local forces, ensuring that everyone knew their positions. Tension crackled in the air as they awaited the enemy's arrival, the silence deafening. "Commander, they're within visual range," Terk reported, his voice tense. "We've got multiple ships and ground forces approaching." Elena's heart raced as she gazed out at the horizon. The Obsidian Legion was a dark swarm against the backdrop of the rising sun, their ships casting long shadows over the colony. "Steady, everyone," she called out, her voice firm. "We've trained for this. Trust in your abilities and remember why we're fighting." As the enemy forces drew closer, Elena's tactical mind shifted into overdrive. "Marcos, prepare to engage the air support. Terk, keep us updated on their movements. We need to know where they're deploying their ground troops." The ground shook as the enemy's heavy artillery rumbled forward, followed by their infantry. "They're advancing on the southern approach," Terk shouted, urgency in his voice. "Open fire," Elena commanded, her heart pounding as the defenses lit up in a barrage of energy blasts. The air filled with chaos as the two sides clashed. The defenders fought bravely, their resolve bolstered by the knowledge that they were not alone. Elena moved among her forces, coordinating their efforts, her voice rising above the din of battle. "Focus fire on the lead vehicles," she shouted, pointing at the armored transports rumbling toward their barricades. As blasts echoed around her, Elena felt the adrenaline surge through her. They were holding their ground, but the Legion's numbers were overwhelming. She needed to find a way to turn the tide. "Marcos, lead a team to flank their ground troops," she instructed. "If we can catch them off guard, we might buy ourselves some time." "On it," Marcos replied, rallying a group of defenders to follow him into the fray. Elena watched as they moved, her heart racing. The sounds of battle filled her ears, blasts of energy, the thud of heavy boots, and the cries of her comrades. It was a symphony of chaos, but amid the turmoil, she found strength in the unity of her forces. "Commander, we've got incoming from the east," Tarek warned, his eyes wide with urgency. "They're attempting to flank us." "Redirect fire to the east," Elena ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to protect our flanks." The defenders pivoted, directing their fire toward the approaching threat. Elena could see the enemy forces attempting to breach their lines, but the defenders held strong, their courage shining through. As the battle raged on, Elena felt the tide shifting. The defenders were pushing back against the overwhelming numbers of the Obsidian Legion, and she could see her crew's determination fueling their fight. "Keep pushing. We can't let them gain any ground," she urged, moving through the lines, inspiring her troops to fight with everything they had. Moments turned into hours as the battle continued. Sweat dripped down Elena's brow as she fought alongside her crew, her heart pounding in her chest. They had to hold the line. Just when it seemed they might falter, a loud explosion shook the ground, and an Allied ship soared overhead, raining down fire upon the enemy forces. "Air support is here," Tarek shouted, relief evident in his voice. Elena turned to see the Martian Independence ships swooping in, engaging the enemy with precision strikes. Their intervention shifted the balance of power, and Elena felt a surge of hope. "Keep fighting. We're gaining momentum," she shouted, rallying her forces. "We can push them back." As the tide of battle began to turn, Elena spotted Marcos leading a charge against the enemy's command unit. His team fought valiantly, and she could see the enemy's resolve wavering as they faced the onslaught. "Press the attack," Elena called out, her voice rising above the chaos. "We can't let up now." Independence began to pay off. The enemy's advance was faltering, and Elena could see cracks forming in their formation. Marcos, leading his team with fierce determination, pressed forward against the enemy command unit. They had fought their way through the chaos, and now, as they neared the heart of the enemy's forces, Elena felt a rush of pride for her crew. Each of them was fighting not just for their survival, but for the future of countless innocents. "Take out that artillery," Marcos shouted, pointing at a heavy cannon that was wreaking havoc on the defenders. "We need to neutralize their fire support." Elena watched as Marcos and his team flanked the artillery position, moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. They coordinated their attacks, suppressing enemy fire and pushing forward. The sound of energy blast filled the air, mixing with the cries of battle as they fought against overwhelming odds. "Commander, we've got movement from the north," Tarek yelled, his voice tinged with urgency. "Another wave is coming in." Elena's heart sank at the sight of fresh enemy troops pouring into the fray. "Reinforce the northern barricades. We can't let them break through," she ordered, adrenaline surging through her as she moved to rally the defenders. She ran through the makeshift defenses, shouting encouragement to her crew. "Hold the line. We've fought too hard to let them take new series." The defenders responded with renewed vigor, pushing back against the new wave of attackers. Elena could see the determination in their eyes, a fierce refusal to back down. "Marcos, how's it going with the artillery?" Elena called, desperate for any good news. "Almost there," he shouted back, his voice filled with determination. "Just need a little more time." Elena nodded, feeling the pressure mounting. They needed to neutralize that artillery if they were to stand a chance. "Let's give them a distraction," Tarek suggested, his eyes scanning the battlefield. We could create a diversion to draw their fire. Good idea, Elena replied. Let's set off some of the traps we've laid around the perimeter. It'll buy us the time we need. As the team scrambled to implement the plan, Elena took a moment to survey the battlefield. The chaos was intense. Energy blasts light the night sky, and the sounds of combat filled the air. Yet amid the turmoil, she felt a strange calm settle over her. They had prepared, they had fought, and they were not alone. Now, Terex shouted as they triggered the traps. Explosions rocked the area, sending debris flying and drawing the attention of the enemy forces. Push forward, Elena yelled, seizing the opportunity. We can't waste this moment. The defenders surged ahead, pressing against the enemy lines. With the enemy distracted, Marcos and his team charged toward the artillery, their resolve unwavering. Elena felt a surge of hope as she watched them advance. Keep moving. We can't let them regroup, Elena shouted, her voice strong. The battle was fierce, but the tide was turning in their favor. As the enemy became disoriented, the defenders pressed their advantage, reclaiming ground that had once been lost. Marcos reached the artillery position, his team engaging the last remaining crew. Cover me, he shouted, diving behind a barricade as the cannon fired one last time before being silenced by their assault. Target neutralized, he yelled, relief flooding his voice. Excellent work, Elena responded, a sense of pride swelling within her. Now let's push into their lines. With renewed determination, the defenders surged forward, breaking through the enemy's formation. The Obsidian Legion, once so confident, now found themselves on the defensive as the tide of battle turned. But just as victory seemed within reach, Elena noticed a massive dropship hovering above the battlefield, its silhouette stark against the dawn sky. Commander, we've got an incoming dropship, Terex warned, his eyes wide. They're deploying reinforcements. Prepare for their landing, Elena commanded, dread creeping into her stomach. We can't let them establish a foothold. The dropship opened its bay doors, releasing a torrent of troops and heavy machinery. The sudden influx of enemy forces threatened to tip the scales back in favor of the Obsidian Legion. Hold the line, Elena yelled, rallying her crew. We need to stop them before they can reinforce their positions. The defenders turned their attention to the new threat, their determination unyielding. They had come too far to lose ground now. Marcos, flank their deployment zone, Elena ordered. We can't let them set up shop. On it, he shouted, leading a small team to engage the new reinforcements. As the battle raged on, Elena felt the pressure mounting. The enemy was regrouping, and their heavy machinery began to churn through the defenses. She needed to act quickly. Bring the air support back in. We need those ships to disrupt their landing, Elena commanded, her heart racing. The Martian Independence responded swiftly, their ships swooping down to unleash a barrage of fire upon the newly arrived forces. The explosions echoed across the battlefield, and Elena felt a surge of hope. Keep pushing, we're not done yet, she shouted to her troops. The defenders rallied, moving to engage the reinforcements. With the air support providing cover, they pressed forward, pushing back against the enemy's advance. In the midst of the chaos, Elena spotted a familiar figure among the enemy troops, a commander, issuing orders with ruthless efficiency. It was a face she recognized all too well, one that sent a chill down her spine. Commander Cellini, she muttered under her breath, her heart pounding. Cellini had been a fierce adversary, one who had orchestrated many of the Legion's most devastating strikes. Commander, we've got a situation, Terex shouted, pulling her from her thoughts. We need to focus on that dropship before it can deploy more troops. Elena nodded, her mind racing. We have to take her out. If we can eliminate their command structure, it might give us the upper hand. Marcos and his team were already engaging the enemy, but the pressure was mounting. They needed to act fast. Let's go, Elena shouted, leading a charge toward the dropship. We'll take out that commander. The team moved with purpose, dodging enemy fire as they advanced. The battlefield was chaotic, but they pushed through, driven by a shared determination. As they reached the drop ship, the air was thick with smoke and debris. Elena could see Commander Cellini issuing orders, her confidence radiating even in the face of adversity. "Take her down," Elena commanded, pointing at the enemy commander. Marcos and his team opened fire, energy blast arcing through the air. Cellini ducked and dodged, but Elena pressed forward, feeling the adrenaline surge through her veins. The two forces clashed in a chaotic exchange of fire. Cellini fought with ruthless precision, her training evident in every movement. But Elena was fueled by a fierce determination, a desire to protect her people and reclaim what was theirs. As the battle raged around them, Elena managed to maneuver into a position to confront Cellini. "This ends here," she shouted, locking eyes with her adversary. Cellini smirked, a glint of amusement in her eyes. "You think you can stop me? Your little band of misfits is no match for the Obsidian Legion." "Maybe, but we'll fight for every inch," Elena shot back, her heart pounding. The two commanders engaged in a fierce battle, energy blasts lighting up the space between them. Elena could feel the weight of her crew's hopes on her shoulders, and she fought with everything she had. "Fall back," Terk shouted to the defenders, trying to keep them in formation as chaos erupted around them. Elena pressed forward, determined to close the gap. "We won't back down, not now." In a decisive moment, she unleashed a powerful blast, striking Cellini's weapon and sending her sprawling backward. "You're stronger than I thought," Cellini admitted, brushing herself off. "But strength alone won't save you." Elena took a breath, her mind racing. "Strength isn't all we have. We have each other." With a rallying cry, Elena turned to her crew, igniting their spirits. "Together, we're unstoppable." The defenders surged forward, inspired by Elena's resolve. They moved as one, pushing back against the enemy forces with renewed determination. Cellini's expression darkened as she realized the tide was turning. "No, this isn't over," she shouted, scrambling to regain control of her troops. But it was too late. The defenders pressed their advantage, closing in on the drop ship and the beleaguered forces. Elena could see the panic in Cellini's eyes as her command structure faltered. "This is your last chance," Elena called out. "Withdraw now, or face the consequences." With a final desperate maneuver, Cellini ordered her remaining forces to regroup, but the damage was done. The defenders pushed forward, their unity shattering the enemy's resolve. The Obsidian Legion began to retreat, their once confident lines fracturing under the pressure. "Keep pushing, don't let them regroup," Elena commanded, her heart racing with adrenaline. As the battle continued, it became clear that they had turned the tide. The enemy was falling back, and the defenders rallied around their newfound strength. "Commander, we did it!" Terk shouted, his eyes shining with triumph. "The Legion is pulling back." Elena felt a rush of pride swell within her. "We fought for our home, and we won," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. She turned to the defenders, their faces a blend of exhaustion and elation. "You fought bravely. This victory is yours as much as it is ours." Cheers erupted around her, a wave of celebration that resonated deep within the colony. They had faced overwhelming odds, and yet they had stood together, united against a common threat. Marcos approached, a broad smile on his face. "That was one hell of a fight, Commander. I didn't think we could hold them off for as long as we did, but we did. We really did." Elena nodded, still trying to process the enormity of what they had accomplished. "It was teamwork and courage that brought us through. We need to regroup and assess our losses. We can't let our guard down just yet." As the reality of the aftermath began to sink in, Elena felt a mixture of emotions. They had won a significant battle, but the scars of war were evident everywhere she looked. The colony's defenses were battered, and many of the defenders were injured or in shock. "Let's set up a triage center," she directed, her tone shifting to one of command once more. "We need to ensure everyone gets the medical attention they require." Terk sprang into action, coordinating with the colony's medical team to establish a makeshift center. Marcos and the rest of the crew assisted wherever they could, tending to the wounded and offering comfort to those who had lost friends and family. Elena moved through the crowd, her heart aching for those who had suffered. She encountered Captain Hale, who was surveying the damage with a somber expression. "We did our best, Commander," Hale said quietly, a hint of sorrow in his voice. "But the cost was high." "Every life saved is worth fighting for," Elena replied, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We will rebuild. We will ensure that this colony remains safe." Hale nodded, though his eyes betrayed the weight of loss. "Your crew fought like warriors. They showed true bravery today." Elena felt a swell of gratitude for her team. "We couldn't have done it without your leadership. This is a community effort, and we'll get through this together." As night fell, the atmosphere in New Series shifted. The initial elation of victory gave way to a somber recognition of the day's toll. Elena gathered her crew and the colony leaders in the command center to discuss their next steps. "Today, we proved that we can stand against the Obsidian Legion," she began, looking around the room at the faces of the weary but resolute leaders. "But we must remain vigilant. They won't take this defeat lightly. We need to prepare for any potential counterattack." Marcos nodded. "We should also consider reinforcing our defenses and reaching out to other colonies. We need allies now more than ever." Terk chimed in, "And we need to assess our resources. We'll need to repair what's been damaged and restock supplies for both the crew and the colony." Elena took a deep breath, the weight of leadership settling over her once again. "Let's divide into teams. Some will focus on repairs, others on outreach to our allies. We'll need to gather intelligence on the Obsidian Legion's movements, and I want to ensure that we're prepared for any surprises they might throw our way." The team dispersed to tackle their assigned tasks, and Elena found herself momentarily alone, staring out at the horizon where the last remnants of the battle lingered in the air. A sense of purpose filled her. They had fought hard, but the fight was far from over. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. The crew of the Sovereign Hope worked alongside the defenders of New Series to rebuild and reinforce their defenses. They patched up damaged structures, set up additional barricades, and enhanced their early warning systems. Elena made it a point to speak with each member of her crew, ensuring they knew how much their contributions meant. She witnessed their resilience firsthand, their spirits lifted as they saw the community come together, even in the face of adversity. One afternoon, as they worked on a perimeter fence, Elena caught sight of a group of children watching from a distance. They were playing, laughter mingling with the sounds of construction. It struck her that even amid the chaos, life continued. The resilience of the human spirit was evident, and it gave her hope. "Hey, come here," Elena called to the children, beckoning them over. They hesitated at first, then approached her shyly. "You're all very brave for being out here. How are you feeling after the battle?" One little girl, her hair braided and her eyes wide with curiosity, spoke up. "We're okay. We saw you fighting. You were like a hero." Elena smiled, her heart warming. "Thank you, but I'm no hero. I just did what was right. It's all of you who inspire me. You're the future, and it's important to remember that no matter how tough things get, we stand together." The children beamed at her, and Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She crouched down to their level. "What's your name?" "Leela," she replied, her voice brightening. "Well, Leela, and all of you, I want you to know that you can always be brave, too. It doesn't have to be in battle. You can be brave in helping others, in standing up for what's right, just like you did today by coming to help." The children nodded, their faces serious yet filled with the innocence of youth. Elena watched as they ran off to play again, a sense of warmth spreading through her. She realized that while they had faced darkness, there was still light to be found, even in the smallest moments. Days turned into weeks, and the repairs to New Series progressed. Elena maintained close contact with the Martian Independents, who provided crucial support and resources. They also worked on gathering intelligence about the Obsidian Legion's next moves, trying to anticipate their actions. One evening, Tarek rushed into the command center, excitement evident in his stride. "Commander, we've intercepted communications from the Obsidian Legion. They're planning a retaliatory strike aimed at us." Elena's heart raced. "Do we have specifics on their targets?" "They're targeting critical infrastructure power plants and supply routes," Tarek explained, urgency in his voice. "If they take those out, we'll be vulnerable." Elena felt the weight of the news settle heavily on her. "We need to prepare for their attack. Let's reinforce those key areas and set up defensive measures. We can't afford to be caught off guard." As the crew mobilized, Elena felt a sense of unease settle over her. The fight against the Obsidian Legion was far from over, and the looming threat of a counterattack hung in the air like a storm cloud. They had achieved a significant victory, but the war was still very much alive. The following days were a blur of activity as they fortified critical locations across the colony. Elena worked tirelessly alongside her crew, directing efforts to enhance their defenses and ensure that every available resource was utilized. "Commander, we've completed the upgrades to the power plant," Marcos reported one afternoon, sweat dripping down his brow. "We've reinforced the barriers and set up automated defenses." "Great work, Marcos," Elena replied, a sense of relief washing over her. "Let's make sure the supply routes are secure next. We need to be able to move resources without interruption." As the preparations continued, Tarek kept a close watch on the Legion's movements. "They're mobilizing," he reported one evening. "We estimate they'll launch their attack within the next 24 hours. Elena gathered her crew for one final briefing. "We've fought hard to protect New Series, and we need to be ready for what's coming. We're facing a determined enemy, but we are stronger together. We know this colony, and we know how to fight for it." The crew nodded, a shared sense of purpose igniting within them. They had become a family, forged in the fires of battle, and they were ready to stand their ground once more. As the night wore on, Elena found herself restless, pacing the command center. She reviewed the tactical plans, mentally preparing for the fight ahead. The uncertainty gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the precipice of something monumental. "Commander," Tarek called, pulling her from her thoughts. "The enemy is approaching. We need to finalize our positions." Elena took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "Let's get everyone in place. We've prepared for this moment. We will not falter." As dawn broke, the colony was a hive of activity, defenders taking their positions and checking their gear. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, a blend of fear and determination hanging in the air. "Remember your training," Elena shouted as she moved among her troops. "Stay focused and trust in each other. We can do this." In the distance, the rumble of engines grew louder, and Elena's heart raced. The Obsidian Legion was here, their dark silhouettes cutting through the dawn sky like harbingers of doom. The defenders readied themselves, a tense hush falling over the assembled crew. Elena scanned the horizon, the adrenaline surging through her as she prepared for the fight ahead. "Artillery, prepare to fire on my mark," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos brewing just beyond the horizon. The crew around her moved with precision, ensuring that every weapon was primed and ready. As the first wave of enemy ships descended, the ground beneath them vibrated with the force of their engines. The air crackled with tension. "Incoming," Tarek shouted, pointing toward the lead vessel, a massive dropship emblazoned with the insignia of the Obsidian Legion. "Now," Elena yelled, her heart pounding as the artillery opened fire. Bright flashes erupted in the air as energy blasts shot toward the descending ships, lighting up the sky like fireworks. The first round struck true, impacting the lead dropship and causing it to veer off course. Cheers erupted among the defenders, but Elena knew better than to let her guard down. "Don't celebrate yet, they'll be coming in hard and fast." As the enemy ships regained their bearings, the first troops began to deploy, jumping from the dropship in tactical formation. Elena's instincts kicked in, and she rallied her crew. "Hold your positions. engage at will. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the defenders unleashed a barrage of fire. Energy blasts collided with the enemy troops, sending them sprawling. The defenders fought valiantly, utilizing the terrain to their advantage. "Flank left," Elena shouted to Marcos, who was coordinating a group of troops to encircle the advancing enemies. "Cut them off before they can regroup." Marcos nodded, his determination palpable. "You got it." He led his team into action, moving quickly and efficiently, capitalizing on the enemy's disarray. Elena focused on the front lines, her heart racing as she witnessed the brutality of the battle. The Obsidian Legion was relentless, pushing forward with grim determination. For every enemy that fell, 2 more took their place. "Commander, we've got a breach on the eastern flank," Tarek shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "They're trying to push through." "Redirect fire to the east," Elena commanded, her mind racing. "We can't let them break our lines." As energy blasts light the battlefield, Elena felt the weight of her responsibility heavy on her shoulders. Lives were on the line, and every decision mattered. She pushed through the chaos, her focus unwavering. "Reinforce the eastern flank," she called, moving to assist Tarek and the defenders. "We'll hold them here." The defenders rallied, pouring everything they had into pushing back the enemy onslaught. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of burning debris. Elena fought alongside her crew, each energy blast ringing in her ears like a drumbeat of determination. But just as they began to push back the enemy forces, Elena spotted movement from the rear of the advancing legion. "Tarek, watch the flank," she yelled, eyes widening as a second wave of enemy reinforcements dropped in. "More ships incoming," Tarek called back, panic lacing his voice. "They're not giving us a moment to breathe." Elena's heart raced. "Fall back. We need to consolidate our defenses." The defenders quickly responded, retreating to safer positions as the new wave of Obsidian troops advanced. They fought with ferocity, and Elena could see the toll the battle was taking on her crew. They were weary, and the relentless onslaught threatened to overwhelm them. "Stay strong," she shouted, determination flooding her voice. "Remember why we're fighting." The defenders rallied again, firing into the fray. Elena glanced at the command center, where the colony's leaders were huddled, coordinating medical support for the wounded and strategizing their next moves. "Commander, they're pushing hard," Marcos called out as he flanked the advancing enemy. "We can't hold them off forever." Elena felt a surge of desperation. "We need to regroup and adapt our strategy. We can't let them break our defenses." Just as she began to formulate a plan, an explosion rocked the ground nearby, sending debris flying. Elena stumbled but quickly regained her footing, scanning the battlefield for her crew. "Marcos, Tarek, everyone, report," she shouted, anxiety coursing through her. "I'm good," Tarek yelled, firing off rounds to fend off the approaching enemy. "But we need to do something now." Elena took a deep breath, pushing her fear aside. "We'll set up a defensive perimeter around the command center. It's crucial we protect our leaders and resources." Marcos nodded, his expression fierce. "We'll need to lay down suppressive fire to keep them back." As they worked to establish a new defensive position, Elena felt a momentary calm settle over her. They were a family, and together they could face anything. "Hold the line," she yelled as enemy troops surged forward, determined to breach their defenses. Energy blasts whizzed through the air, and the defenders responded with everything they had. "Keep your heads down," Tarek shouted, diving behind cover as the enemy advanced. The sound of explosions and the cries of battle filled the air, creating a cacophony of chaos. The battle wore on, the hours blending into one another as Elena and her crew fought valiantly against the relentless tide of the Obsidian Legion. But fatigue began to set in, and she could see her crew struggling to maintain their focus. "Take a breath when you can," Elena shouted over the din. "We're in this together." With each passing moment, the situation became more dire. The defenders were slowly being pushed back, their lines crumbling under the enemy's persistent assault. Elena could feel the weight of despair creeping in, but she refused to let it take hold. "We need to create a diversion," she yelled, trying to inspire her crew. "Marcos, take a team and hit their supply lines. If we can disrupt their reinforcements, we might just stand a chance." Marcos nodded, determination etched on his face. "I'm on it. We'll hit them where it hurts." As he and his team moved out, Elena gathered the remaining defenders. "We need to hold strong. Every moment counts. We will not let them take our home." The defenders rallied, their spirits reigniting as they pushed back against the enemy. Elena fought alongside them, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. But as the battle raged on, she felt the strain of leadership weighing heavily on her. She had always believed in the power of unity, and now she needed to draw upon that belief more than ever. "Together," she shouted, trying to instill a sense of collective strength. "We are new series. We will stand our ground." The tide began to shift as the defenders fought fiercely, pushing back against the relentless onslaught of the Obsidian Legion. Each energy blast felt like a testament to their resolve, each fallen enemy a step closer to reclaiming their home. Then, just as they began to gain momentum, Elena spotted movement from the shadows, a small team of enemy operatives flanking their position. "Look out," she yelled, pointing. "They're trying to get behind us." Terk quickly redirected fire, shouting to the others, "Form up, don't let them break through." Elena could feel her heart racing as she moved to intercept the enemy team, her crew rallying around her. They engaged in fierce close-quarters combat, the chaos of the battlefield blurring around them. "Focus, we've trained for this," Elena shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "Stay together." As the last of the enemy operatives fell, Elena took a moment to catch her breath, sweat pouring down her face. But the respite was short-lived. She could still hear the sounds of battle raging around her. "Marcos, report," she called over the comms, trying to gauge the situation. "Commander, we've successfully hit their supply lines, but they're regrouping," Marcos replied, urgency lacing his voice. "We need to hold them off until we can stabilize our defenses." "Reinforcements are on the way," Terk shouted, sweat glistening on his brow. "But we need to create a stronger line now." Elena's mind raced. "We'll set up barricades and use whatever resources we have left. This is our moment to strike back." As they fortified their position, the sound of heavy footsteps approached. The ground shook beneath them as the Obsidian Legion's heavy machinery rolled into view, tanks and armored units poised to break through their defenses. "Get ready," Elena shouted, adrenaline surging through her veins. "Prepare to fire." The defenders took their position, hearts pounding as the enemy closed in. They unleashed a torrent of energy blasts, but the enemy's armor absorbed the brunt of their fire. "They're too heavily armed," Terk yelled, panic creeping into his voice. "We need a different approach." "Flank them," Elena commanded. "We can't let them break our lines." As the crew moved to outmaneuver the enemy, Elena caught a glimpse of the horizon, a flash of light, signaling the arrival of reinforcements. "Support is here," she shouted, a wave of relief washing over her. "Hold the line." The defenders fought with renewed energy as the Martian Independence swooped in, their ships raining fire upon the enemy. The tide of battle began to shift once again, and Elena felt hope rekindle in her heart. Slaught of reinforcements. The Martian Independence had come through, their ships weaving through the skies, delivering a precise volley of fire that turned the tide in favor of new series. "Keep pushing," Elena yelled, feeling a surge of hope as the combined forces pushed against the enemy lines. The sound of explosions filled the air, punctuated by the cries of battle and the roar of energy blasts. As the defenders rallied, Elena quickly coordinated with Marcos and Terk, directing fire and managing troop movements. "We need to focus our fire on their armored units. Aim for the weak points." The defenders adjusted their aim, pouring concentrated fire into the approaching tanks. With each successful strike, their confidence grew, and the enemy's advance began to falter. The weight of the battle, which had once felt so crushing, was finally lifting. Elena moved with purpose, her every command punctuated by the urgency of the moment. Flank left, let's encircle them. The defenders executed the maneuver flawlessly, splitting the enemy's forces and pushing them back. For every fallen enemy, the defenders felt a sense of vindication, a testament to their resilience. Suddenly, an ominous rumble echoed through the air, and Elena turned to see a colossal battle cruiser descending from the clouds, its dark hull gleaming menacingly in the sunlight. "Commander," Terex shouted, eyes wide with alarm. "That ship is massive. We can't let it land." "Rally the troops," Elena barked, her heart racing. "We need to take it out before it can deploy more troops." The defenders quickly shifted their focus, setting their sights on the incoming cruiser. Elena's pulse quickened as she felt the weight of responsibility settle over her once more. "Aim for the engines. If we can disable it, we can stop its deployment." The artillery roared to life, energy blasts streaking toward the cruiser. With each impact, the massive vessel shuddered, but it continued its descent, determined to reach the surface. Come on, Elena urged, her heart in her throat. The cruiser loomed closer, and she could see the enemy forces beginning to prepare for deployment. "Firing," Terex shouted, his voice rising above the din. The defenders unleashed a concentrated volley, energy blasts striking the cruiser with renewed ferocity. Suddenly, the cruiser's engines sputtered, flames erupting from the rear. A cheer erupted from the defenders as they watched the vessel begin to tilt, its descent faltering. "Direct hit," Marcos yelled, grinning widely. "Keep firing. Don't let up." Elena felt a surge of triumph, but she couldn't let herself be distracted. "Focus. They'll still try to deploy troops. Prepare for ground forces." As the cruiser struggled to regain control, Elena watched as a hatch opened and enemy troops began to drop onto the battlefield. The defenders quickly redirected their fire, now faced with another wave of infantry as the cruiser descended, though its descent was no longer as assured. "Protect our perimeter," she yelled, her voice cutting through the noise. "We can't let them break through." With a renewed sense of urgency, the defenders engaged the new wave of enemy troops. The sound of energy blasts mingled with the cries of the wounded, but Elena remained steadfast, her eyes sharp and focused. "Push them back," Terex shouted, leading a group toward the emerging enemy forces. "We've got them on the ropes." Elena fought alongside her crew, feeling every pulse of adrenaline as they pressed forward. She could see the strain on their faces, but the determination shone through. This was a fight for their lives, for their home, and they would not give up. As the cruiser continued to struggle against the onslaught, Elena felt a swell of hope. "We can take them," she shouted, her voice ringing out across the battlefield. "We are new series." But just as victory seemed within reach, the ground shook violently, and a powerful explosion erupted from the cruiser's remaining engines. A shockwave rippled through the air, throwing defenders off their feet. Elena hit the ground hard, her vision spinning. She blinked, struggling to regain her focus as the dust settled. "Terex, Marcos," she called out, her voice hoarse. A groan of pain nearby caught her attention, and she scrambled to her feet, scanning the chaos around her. The battle raged on, but her crew was in disarray, and she needed to regroup. "Get to cover," she shouted, spotting Terex struggling to rise. She rushed over to help him, her heart racing. "Are you hurt?" "Just stunned," he replied, shaking his head to clear it. "But we need to get back to the fight." Elena nodded, helping him to his feet. "We need to regroup and assess our position. The cruiser is still operational, and we can't let them deploy any more forces." As they pushed through the chaos, they found Marcos rallying a group of defenders. "Over here," he shouted, gesturing them to regroup. "We need to form a defensive line and hold our ground." Elena joined him, her heart swelling with pride at the sight of her crew coming together despite the odds. "We need to push back against the infantry," she called, her voice cutting through the noise. "Form ranks." The defenders rallied around her, quickly falling into formation as the enemy continued to pour onto the battlefield. Elena felt a rush of determination. They would not be defeated. "Hold the line," she shouted, her voice firm. "We've come too far to let them take us now." As they stood resolute, the sound of the cruiser's engines sputtering filled the air. Elena turned to see it struggling to remain airborne, the once menacing vessel now a target of opportunity. "Now is our chance," Terk yelled, pointing. "If we can hit it one more time, we might take it down for good." Elena felt a surge of adrenaline. "Artillery, prepare to fire on the cruiser. Aim for the center." The defenders rallied, taking aim as the cruiser began to falter. "Fire," Elena commanded, her heart pounding in her chest. A wave of energy blast shot toward the cruiser, striking it with precise intensity. The vessel shuddered violently, and for a moment it looked as though it might hold together. But then, with a final, deafening explosion, the cruiser erupted in a fireball, debris raining down across the battlefield. Cheers erupted from the defenders, their spirits reignited as they witnessed the enemy's massive vessel crumble before them. "We did it," Terk shouted, adrenaline coursing through him. "Don't let up," Elena yelled, her heart racing. "We need to keep pushing. The battle isn't over yet." The remaining enemy forces hesitated, the loss of their cruiser shaking their resolve. Elena saw an opportunity. "Now, advance," she commanded, leading the charge alongside her crew. With renewed vigor, the defenders surged forward, engaging the remaining enemy troops. They fought with everything they had, every blast of energy fueled by the hope of reclaiming their home. As they pressed on, Elena fought fiercely alongside Terk and Marcos, her heart soaring as they pushed the enemy back, inch by inch. The tide had turned, and they were no longer on the defensive. "Keep going," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "We're almost there." The battle raged on, the sounds of combat mixing with the cries of victory as the defenders slowly but surely began to take control. The Obsidian Legion's forces faltered, their lines breaking under the relentless assault of the defenders. Elena felt a surge of triumph as she saw the enemy troops begin to retreat, their morale crumbling. "Push them back, don't let them regroup," she called, her voice fueled by determination. As they continued to press forward, the battlefield transformed into a landscape of victory. The defenders fought not just for their lives, but for their home, a place they had built together, forged through struggle and perseverance. Finally, as the last of the enemy forces retreated, a deafening cheer erupted from the defenders. "We did it," Terk shouted, throwing his arms in the air. "We held them off." Elena stood amidst the chaos, her heart racing as she took in the sight of her crew, and the defenders celebrating their hard-won victory. They had faced overwhelming odds and had emerged victorious. But amidst the celebration, a pang of grief struck her heart. The cost of their victory weighed heavily on her. Lives had been lost, and the scars of battle would linger long after the fighting ceased. She turned to her crew, her heart swelling with pride. "You all fought bravely today," she said, her voice steady. "We stood together against a formidable foe, and we emerged victorious. But we must remember those we lost along the way. Their sacrifices brought us here, and we owe it to them to honor their memory." As the cheers of victory began to settle into a solemn recognition of their losses, Elena felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would rebuild, stronger than before, and ensure that new series remained a beacon of hope in a dark universe. In the days that followed, the colony began the process of healing. The survivors mourned their losses while also celebrating their hard-won victory. Elena worked alongside her crew to assess the damage, prioritize repairs, and ensure that every member of the community received the support they needed. Elena made it a priority to honor the fallen, holding a memorial service for those who had given their lives to protect new series. It was a bittersweet moment, filled with tears and stories of bravery. As she stood before the assembled crowd, she felt the weight of their shared grief, but also the resilience that bound them together. Each name spoken was a reminder of the sacrifices made, the bravery displayed, and the hope that still flickered in their hearts. Today, We remember our fallen, Elena began, her voice steady. They fought valiantly, giving everything they had to protect this home we built together. They will never be forgotten. Their courage lives on in each of us, and we must honor their memory by continuing to fight for our future. As she spoke, she could see the faces of her crew, Terk, Marcos, and the others reflecting the pain of loss and the fire of determination. They would rebuild, not just for themselves, but for those who could no longer stand with them. In the days that followed, the community began to heal. Elena led the efforts to restore the colony, coordinating with engineers and volunteers to assess the damage and prioritize repairs. The remnants of battle littered the landscape, but beneath the debris lay the heart of new series, a place forged in hope, resilience, and the unwavering spirit of its people. Terk worked tirelessly to repair the energy shields, which had been compromised during the assault. If we can fortify these defenses, we'll be better prepared for any future attacks, he told Elena one afternoon as they surveyed the damage together. Elena nodded, grateful for his unwavering dedication. Absolutely, and we should also consider establishing better communication systems with our allies. If we're going to face threats like the Obsidian Legion again, we need to be prepared. Marcos joined them, a map of the colony spread out before him. We should also discuss our supply routes. We need to ensure that we can sustain ourselves, even in the face of an attack. If they hit our supply lines, we'll be vulnerable. Elena listened intently, her mind racing with possibilities. You're right. We can't let our guard down. We need to strengthen our infrastructure and build alliances with other colonies. We have to make sure we're never alone in this fight. As the days turned into weeks, the community came together, driven by a shared sense of purpose. They repaired buildings, reinforced defenses, and held training sessions to ensure that everyone was prepared to fight if necessary. The spirit of new series shone brightly, even in the face of adversity. Elena often found herself reflecting on the battle, the chaos, the fear, the triumph. It had changed her, solidifying her resolve to protect her home and her people. She sought solace in her training, spending hours honing her combat skills, pushing herself to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Elena stood on the balcony of the command center, gazing out at the vast expanse of Mars. The landscape had been scarred by battle, but it still held beauty: the rolling red hills, the distant mountains, and the ever-watchful stars above. Beautiful, isn't it? Terk's voice broke through her thoughts as he joined her on the balcony. It is, she replied, turning to him. Even after everything we've been through, there's something about this place that makes me feel hopeful. Terk leaned against the railing, his expression thoughtful. Hope is what we need right now. After a fight like that, it's easy to lose sight of it. Elena nodded, understanding the weight of his words. But we can't let fear dictate our future. We need to stand strong, united. We've faced darkness and come out stronger. We can rebuild. Together, Terk added, a hint of a smile creeping onto his face. I'm in. Whatever it takes. As the weeks turned into months, the colony thrived. With each passing day, they rebuilt not only their defenses, but their sense of community. Elena organized community events, encouraging everyone to come together, share stories, and forge bonds. The memory of their fallen comrades served as a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. During one such gathering, they shared a feast, with food and laughter filling the air. The atmosphere was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the battles they had fought. Elena watched as families came together, children played, and friendships deepened. "Commander, over here!" a voice called, drawing her attention. It was Marcos, waving her over. "What's up?" she asked, walking over to him. "Check this out," he said, gesturing to a group of engineers gathered around a makeshift table. They had constructed a model of the new defensive perimeter, complete with upgraded energy shields and weapon placements. "We're discussing the new layout for the colony's defenses." Elena leaned in, examining the model with interest. "This looks great. What are the key changes?" One of the engineers pointed to a section of the model. We're planning to create a secondary perimeter with advanced detection systems. This will give us an early warning if anything approaches. We want to ensure we have multiple layers of defense. I like it, Elena said, nodding. It'll give us time to respond and mobilize our forces if needed. Keep me updated on the progress. As the night wore on, Elena found herself feeling more optimistic than she had in months. The sense of community that had emerged in the aftermath of their battle was palpable, and it fueled her determination to lead them into the future. Yet, despite the camaraderie and hope surrounding her, a nagging feeling remained. The Obsidian Legion had been a formidable foe, and while they had won this battle, the war was far from over. She needed to prepare for whatever threats might still be lurking in the shadows. Late one night, as Elena sat in her quarters poring over reports, a message flashed across her screen. It was a communication from an Allied colony on the far side of Mars. "Commander," the message began, "we've detected unusual activity in the vicinity of the Obsidian Legion's last known location. There are rumors of their regrouping. We wanted to inform you immediately, as we believe they may target new series again." Elena's heart raced as she absorbed the implications of the message. They had to act quickly. She quickly drafted a response, outlining their defenses and expressing gratitude for the warning. After sending the message, she leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. "They're coming back," she whispered to herself. "I need to prepare the crew." The next day, Elena called an emergency meeting with her senior officers and key members of the colony. As they gathered in the command center, she could feel the tension in the air. Everyone knew the stakes. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began, her voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. "We've received word from an Allied colony that the Obsidian Legion may be regrouping and preparing for another attack." Gasps echoed around the room, and she saw concern etched on their faces. "We need to act quickly. Our defenses have improved, but we must be prepared for any eventuality." Terk leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What's our plan? How do we fortify our position even more?" "We need to strengthen our alliances," Elena replied, her mind racing. "We can't face this threat alone. We should reach out to neighboring colonies and establish a coalition. If they're regrouping, we need to be ready to counterattack." Marcos nodded, his expression resolute. "I can handle the communication with the other colonies. We'll need their support if we're going to stand a chance." "Good," Elena said, feeling a sense of relief. "We also need to organize training drills for our forces. Everyone should be prepared for a potential attack at a moment's notice." As they discussed strategies, the atmosphere shifted from fear to determination. Each officer contributed ideas, and they brainstormed ways to enhance their defenses, improve their weaponry, and bolster their morale. Days turned into a whirlwind of activity as the crew worked tirelessly to prepare. The colony buzzed with energy, each member focused on the task at hand. Training sessions were held daily, honing their skills and ensuring that everyone was ready to defend their home. Elena spent time in the training grounds, working alongside her crew, pushing them to their limits, and showing them that she was right there with them. The camaraderie among the defenders grew stronger, forged in the fires of preparation and determination. As the day of reckoning approached, Elena could feel the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. They had done everything they could to prepare, but the uncertainty of what lay ahead gnawed at her. One evening, she found herself back on the balcony, gazing out at the red landscape. The stars twinkled above, distant and unattainable, yet somehow comforting. Terk joined her, sensing her unease. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside her. Elena sighed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I just can't shake the feeling that we're not ready for what's coming. What if they come at us with everything they have?" Terk studied her for a moment, then placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We've faced them before, and we stood our ground. We're stronger now, more united. You've prepared us well. Trust in your leadership and in each other." She turned to him, gratitude swelling in her chest. "You're right. We've built something here. We have each other, and that makes us stronger than any force that tries to take us down. As the days passed, the tension in the air became almost palpable. The community buzzed with anxious energy, each member aware of the potential threat looming on the horizon. Elena and her crew worked tirelessly, ensuring that every possible contingency was in place. They fortified the perimeter, installed additional energy barriers, and increased patrols around the colony. Training exercises became more rigorous, simulating various attack scenarios. Each member of the colony was acutely aware that their survival depended on their unity and preparedness. As Elena reviewed the latest reports in the command center, a communication came through from an allied colony. Marcos, who had been coordinating their outreach, appeared more energized than usual. "Commander, we've received a positive response from several nearby colonies. They're willing to form a coalition and provide reinforcements if the Obsidian Legion strikes again." Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. "That's excellent news, Marcos. We need to solidify those alliances and ensure everyone understands our strategy. We can't afford any miscommunication." Terk, seated next to Marcos, chimed in. "We should organize a summit with the leaders of these colonies. Face-to-face meetings will strengthen our bonds and allow us to discuss our tactics in detail." "Agreed," Elena said. "Let's schedule it for next week. We'll need to outline our defenses, share intelligence, and ensure everyone is on the same page." As preparations for the summit began, Elena dedicated time to refining their strategy. She mapped out potential attack routes, identified key points of vulnerability in their defenses, and considered how to utilize the strengths of their allies effectively. The collaborative spirit of the community shone through as people offered insights, suggestions, and resources to bolster their plans. The night before the summit, Elena gathered her senior officers for a final briefing. The atmosphere was tense, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. "Tomorrow is crucial," she said, pacing the room. "We need to present a united front. The more cohesive we are, the stronger we'll appear to the Obsidian Legion." Marcos nodded. "We should also prepare a joint statement, outlining our commitment to protect one another. It'll send a clear message that we won't back down." "Good idea," Elena replied, feeling a sense of camaraderie with her team. "And we should emphasize our mutual support during this challenging time." As they discussed the details, Elena felt a renewed sense of hope. They had come together, strengthened by adversity, and now they were prepared to face whatever came next. The following day, leaders from the allied colonies arrived at New Ceres, each bringing their own strengths and resources. The atmosphere buzzed with energy as they gathered in the command center, shaking hands and sharing stories of their struggles against the Obsidian Legion. Elena stood at the forefront, ready to address the assembled leaders. "Thank you all for being here," she began, her voice firm yet welcoming. "Today, we stand united in our commitment to defend our homes and our way of life. The Obsidian Legion has tested us, but together, we can turn the tide." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and she could see the determination reflected in their eyes. "We've each faced our own battles, and we know the cost of inaction. We must share intelligence, bolster our defenses, and prepare for any eventuality. Our strength lies in our unity." As the discussions unfolded, each leader presented their insights and strategies. They examined maps of the region, discussed patrol routes, and identified resources that could be shared. The sense of collaboration deepened, and Elena felt a sense of pride in what they were building together. One leader, a stoic woman named Lyra, spoke passionately about the need for shared resources. "If we combine our supply lines, we'll be less vulnerable to attacks on our individual colonies. We can support one another in times of need." Elena nodded in agreement. "And we should establish a communication network. Real-time updates will be crucial if we need to mobilize quickly." As the summit progressed, the atmosphere shifted from cautious optimism to a palpable sense of determination. Elena saw a flicker of hope igniting in her fellow leaders as they recognized the power of their coalition. By the end of the day, they had established a comprehensive plan, outlining their collective response to the threat. Elena felt a surge of gratitude for the strength of their alliances, knowing that they would stand together when the time came. However, as they wrapped up, a tension lingered in the air. They all understood the stakes. Their discussions were vital, but the reality of the impending threat loomed over them like a dark cloud. That night, as Elena lay in her quarters, she struggled to quiet her racing mind. The faces of her fallen comrades haunted her, reminding her of the price of war. She couldn't afford to lose anyone else. With a sigh, she pushed herself up from her bed and headed to the command center, feeling the need to be among her team. The soft glow of monitors lit the space, and she found Terk and Marcos poring over reports, their expressions focused. "Couldn't sleep?" Terk asked, glancing up as she entered. "No, I just wanted to check in," she replied, joining them at the table. "How are the preparations for the coalition going?" Marcos leaned back in his chair. "They're solid. Everyone is on board with the plan, and they've committed to sending reinforcements if needed. But there's still a lot to do." "We can't afford to underestimate the Obsidian Legion," Elena said, her tone serious. "They're cunning, and we have to anticipate their moves." As they strategized late into the night, the atmosphere shifted from one of anxiety to determination. They shared ideas, debated tactics, and focused on what they could control. The following week brought a tense anticipation as they awaited any sign of the Obsidian Legion's movements. The days passed slowly, each minute filled with uncertainty, and the community remained on high alert. During one of the training sessions, Elena noticed that many of the defenders seemed to carry an undercurrent of fear, and she felt it too. She gathered them in the courtyard, determined to address the growing tension. "Listen up, everyone," she called, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "I know we're all feeling the weight of uncertainty right now. We've faced our fears before, and we've come out stronger on the other side. We are not just a colony, we are a community, a family. Together, we can face anything." The crowd responded with cheers, and she felt a swell of pride as their spirits lifted. "But we also need to be prepared. Fear can be a powerful force, but it can also drive us to be better. Let's channel that energy into our training." As the days wore on, the tension only seemed to grow. The coalition continued to prepare for the worst, but the stillness in the air felt ominous. Rumors circulated that the Obsidian Legion was amassing forces, and Elena felt the weight of responsibility bearing down on her. Then, one evening, a communication came in from an ally who had been monitoring the situation. The message was grim. "Commander, we've spotted an approaching fleet matching the Obsidian Legion's ships. They're heading straight for New Ceres." Elena's heart raced as she turned to her team, who had gathered around her. "It's happening. We need to mobilize everyone immediately." The command center erupted into action as they relayed orders and prepared for battle. The defenders moved with a sense of urgency, each member knowing their role as they armed themselves and took their positions. As the ships of the Obsidian Legion appeared on the horizon, a sense of dread mingled with the adrenaline coursing through her veins. They were ready, but the stakes had never felt higher. "Defensive positions," Elena shouted, her voice steady. "We'll hold the line." The energy shields hummed to life as the defenders positioned themselves along the perimeter, weapons at the ready. Elena scanned the skies, her heart pounding as the enemy fleet approached. "Here they come," Terk shouted, pointing to the dark ships that blotted out the sun as they descended. The first volleys of energy blasts erupted from the Obsidian ships, striking the energy barriers surrounding New Ceres. The impact sent shockwaves through the ground, and Elena gritted her teeth, focusing on the battle ahead. "Return fire," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. The defenders unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, light the sky as they engaged the enemy. The sound of battle filled the air, explosion, cries, and the relentless hum of energy weapons. Elena fought alongside her crew, adrenaline surging through her as they pushed against the enemy's assault. "Keep them back," she shouted, her heart racing as she witnessed the defenders rallying together, their resolve unwavering even in the face of overwhelming odds. The ground shook as enemy troops began to deploy from their ships, and Elena knew they needed to act quickly. "Form ranks! Hold the perimeter!" she yelled, directing the defenders as they moved to fortify their position against the incoming wave of enemy forces. As they pushed back against the onslaught, Elena's focus sharpened. She spotted a group of enemy soldiers attempting to breach a weak point in their defenses and rushed to intercept them, her weapon raised. "Get back!" she shouted, firing at the advancing troops. The energy blast struck true, and she felt a rush of satisfaction as they faltered, buying precious moments for her fellow defenders. "Flank them," Terk called, coordinating their response as they worked to hold the line. The sound of battle surrounded them, a cacophony of energy blasts and the cries of the wounded.